Hey there YouTube, it's PhantomYGO here, and today I want to bring you my very first deck profile, and today it's going to be on Qliphorts. Now I've been running Qliphorts ever since they came out, and it's one of my personal favorite decks, and I know recently they kind of dropped off a little bit in popularity, especially in big tournaments, but I still think Qliphorts are one of the best decks out there. I think they have a really good matchup against every other meta deck, and that's because Qliphorts have a couple different ways that they can be played. Right now the turbo variant is very popular, where you just pretty much turbo out towers and turn one and gain a lot of advantage on your opponent just off of that, and he's really hard to get over. So even if your opponent's able to get over towers, they typically run two, so then they just bring out another towers, and the second one is just really hard to get over for your opponent, or they just have no outsit and they scoop. Or you can go the more control-oriented way with Qliphorts, where you run a lot of traps. You basically just try and stun your opponent and prevent them from playing Yu-Gi-Oh, and then you just flood the board and kill them. But the version I'm running today is a little bit more in between the turbo and the control-oriented variant. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get on to the deck profile. So for my monsters, I'm running the 1 towers. I know the turbos variant tends to run 2, but in my version, since I don't rely heavily on towers, but he's still my boss monster, 1's enough. And then I'm also running 3 carrier and 3 helix. I maxed out on these 3 guys just because they're the ones you want to see turn 1. Summoning one of them and equipping Sacrifice is still a very powerful play, and since you rely a lot on tributing, especially for towers, these are the guys you want to be tributing just because they add so much utility to the deck. So 3 of each. And then getting on to the bigger Qliphorts, I'm running 2 Cephalopod. I'm pretty much running 2 of him just because I'm running a higher Qliphort count, and you'll see why a little later once I get into my spells. But he's basically just another name, a Qliphort name that I can draw into. But his life point gain is actually a little relevant just because sometimes it can lead to another search off scout, which in turn can be game changing for you, just the extra card you get. So 2 Cephalopod. And then I'm running 2 Shell. Again, he's just another Qliphort name that I can draw into, but his 2 attacks can actually be really relevant because they can kill your opponent quicker, but they can also help clear some boards that your opponent has already established. And then I'm running 2 Disc. Disc isn't as good as he used to be, but he's still a very good turn 1 play. He helps thin your deck out and help set up plays for your next turn. He facilitates OTKs, so I still really like him at 2. And then for what I think is the best Qliphort is Qliphort Stealth. I think Stealth is just way too versatile. He helps facilitate OTKs if you tribute off a Helix and a Carrier, any combination of the 2. He can just clear out your opponent's entire board and you can swing for game. He also helps get rid of problem exceed monsters or extra deck monsters that opponent has. And then he can also bounce your scout back to your hand, and so you can get a second search at turn. He just provides a lot for the deck, which is why he's my favorite. And then getting to the normal Qliphorts, I'm running 1 Monolith and 2 Scout. Scout, no explanation here. He's just like your main searcher for the deck. He's what you want to get into your hand first turn. But Monolith has gained a lot more importance in this meta, basically because you rely a lot more on towers as a Qliphort player, and with that being the case, if you have him in your Pendulum Zone and you tribute 3 for towers, that's 3 draws you get at the end of your turn, and just getting those 3 draws at the end of the turn can pretty much just win you the game because you just get so much card advantage. So Monolith has just gained a lot more utility in the deck now just because towers is way more prevalent. And then for my last 2 monsters that aren't Qliphorts, I'm running 2 Effect Veiler. And I'm running 2 Veiler instead of Phoenix Chains in this deck because I wanted something that I could draw into off of Monolith at the end of my turn that was automatically live. So going into my opponent's turn, Valor is pretty much a trap in my hand that I can already use. I used to run Phoenix Chains over Valor, but it made my Monolith draws not as good because I would draw into stuff that I couldn't use on my opponent's turn. They weren't live until my next turn. But with Valor, it makes Monolith even that much better in this deck. So I really like the 2 effect Valor. And then getting into my spells, I'm running the 1 Sacrifice. Not much to be said about Sacrifice. It's one of the best cards in the deck, one of the best spell cards to ever be created. And then I'm running 3 Wavering Eyes. In the Towers versions, all Qliphort players are running 3 Wavering Eyes, but in the more control-oriented ones, they're not really running 3 Wavering Eyes because they don't run as much Qliphorts. So sometimes it could be just a dead draw in your opening hand. But since I am running a little bit of a higher Qliphort count, I'm running 3 Wavering Eyes just because it's essentially another scout in your opening hand, and just drawing it could lead to turn 1 Towers. So I think this card is just like way too powerful not to run. And then for my last spells, I'm running 3 Summoner's Art. It's the roto of the deck, just adds the consistency. And for my traps, I'm running 1 Recreate. I still really like Recreate just because after your first turn, or even on your first turn, if you have everything you need and you already have an established board, you can just go ahead and search it off of Scout, and it just makes you feel a lot safer. Just a defensive trap against like Necros, that's really good. So 1 Recreate, and then 1 Skill Drain and 1 Vanity's Emptiness. Not much to be said about them. They're basically the best floodgates to ever be created. You have to run both of them. They're just way too powerful. And then I'm running 1 Solemn Warning. I think as a Qliphort player, you need to be running Solemn Warning just because it's so good in the mirror match. And it's just decent in every other matchup. Same thing with Bottomless Trap Hole. It can be so game-changing in the mirror. Your opponent tries a Pendulum 5, you flip this, and you basically just win the game off of that. And yeah, some decks it's dead against, but there's always situations where Bottomless can be used, so I think it's just too good of a card not to run. And then I'm running 2 Mirror Force. I really like Mirror Force right now just because I think it's such a huge tempo card. It helps me not get OTK'd by my opponent. So it's essentially a very good defensive card, but it also clears my opponent's board out so that I can flood the board and kill them next turn. So it's a very defensive card that turns my defense into offense next turn. So I really like the 2 Mirror Force. And then I'm running 3 Mind Crush. Just because it's really good in the mirror match. You go first and you set this, and then your opponent adds Scout to their hand, and you flip this. Just get into the graveyard. Sometimes it's just really hard for a Qliphort player to come back from if they can't use Scout on their first turn. It's obviously really good against the Necros match too. So yeah, I think 3 Mind Crush is just a really solid card right now. And then for my last 3 cards I'm running are 3 Lose a Turn. Qliphorts are obviously one of the decks that utilizes this card the best. We don't really care about it because we can just flood the board, and even though all our guys go to defense, we can tribute off 3 for towers, and tribute off for any of our bigger guys, and just attack. And it helps us not get OTK'd in the mirror match. It also helps, prevent us from like Trishes and other powerful effect monsters. So 3 Lose a Turn is just, I think, a staple in any Qliphort deck. And going on to the extra deck, I just run a bunch of 1 of rank 4s. I run 1 Castel, 1 Honor Arc, 1 Exciton, 1 Dark Rebellion, 1 Daigusa Emerald, 1 Heartland Draco, 1 Black Ship of Corn, 1 Cowboy, 1 Dweller, 1 Ptolemaeus, 1 Diamond, 1 Direwolf, 1 Carnagorgon, 1 Rhapsody, and 1 Ragna Zero. Now in Qliphorts, if you've ever played them, you would know that you don't really go into your extra deck a lot. I've always found that as a Qliphort player, if I go into my extra deck, then I'm probably not in a good state in the game. I'm probably behind and I'm trying to catch up. But you still need your extra deck just because there are situations where, all these cards here could win you the game or help bring you back into the game. So that's pretty much the end of the deck profile there. I really appreciate it if you guys left a comment in the just down below, just because it is my very first deck profile. So I'd like to know what I did good, what I can improve on, what you guys want to see in the future. I have a lot of deck profiles that I want to share with you guys. So please leave a comment and help me out with what I can do better and what you guys want to see in the future. So thanks YouTube. I really appreciate you taking your time to watch this video, and I hope to see you later.